Certain it is, the place still continues under the sway of some witching power that holds a spell over the minds of the good people, causing them to walk in a continual reverie. They are given to all kinds of marvelous beliefs, are subject to trances and visions, and frequently see strange sights and hear music and voices in the air. The whole neighborhood abounds with local tales, haunted spots, and twilight superstitions. Stars shoot and meteors glare oftener across the valley than in any other part of the country. And the nightmare, with her whole ninefold, seems to make it the favorite scene of our gambles. The dominant spirit, however, that haunts this enchanted region and seems to be the commander-in-chief of all the powers of the air is the apparition of a figure on horseback without a head. This is Carolina Haints. It had been a very long and trying evening for the lone watchman of the Wedgefield plantation. On any other night, there would be nearly 24 other guards on the grounds along with him. But tonight was a special occasion, even if it didn't feel that way to him. Nearly every British soldier in town had been invited to Mansfield Plantation for dinner. Everyone except him. You see, the year was 1781. The Revolutionary War was in full swing. British forces, led by Captain John Saunders, occupied Georgetown, South Carolina. Both Wedgefield and Mansfield plantations were owned by men sympathetic to England and had opened their homes to the British cause. The mansion at Mansfield Plantation was larger, so Captain Saunders set up his command center there, while Wedgefield was used as a hospital and to house prisoners of war. And tonight, there's 3 colonial POWs in the dungeon of the plantation. So, someone had to, as they say, man the fort, and he had drawn the short straw. So there he was, a lone sentry patrolling the perimeter of the main house, lap after boring lap, round and round. What was that? He hears a twig snap. It could be an animal, a rabbit or a fox, or maybe a colonist rebel. He checked his pistol and listened. There! That was definitely the sound of gravel being crunched under a boot.
Who goes there?
He calls. Almost immediately, a primal scream rises from behind him. He turns to find several rebels rushing toward him, with their swords drawn. He fires his pistol but misses his mark. The men are on him before he has a chance to draw his own blade. He doesn't even see the enemy's sword that takes his head clean off. A second later, his body catches up to the fact that he's dead and collapses beside his head. In the late 1690s, the Black River Rice Company operated a plantation near Georgetown, South Carolina. And in 1762, Black River Rice was dissolved and the land was purchased by local businessmen eager to take over South Carolina's lucrative rice farming. Samuel Wragg purchased 520 acres and created Wedgefield Plantation. There was already a modest 1.5-story house on the property when Wragg settled in, but he was a respected planter, merchant, and political figure in South Carolina. So, he built a larger, more extravagant house nearby and let the plantation overseer live in the existing home. Wedgefield stayed in the Wragg family for over 100 years after Samuel's death. In 1888, It was sold to the prominent Hazard family, who eventually leveled the mansion and built a new house. In the 1930s, the house was dismantled and the bricks repurposed to build the mansion that stands there today. And in the 1970s, the property was sold to a land developer who turned it into a golf club. But the story of our lone nameless Sentry takes place during the Revolution, when Wedgeville Plantation was owned by Samuel Wragg. When the war began in 1775, Wragg was conflicted. Sure, he was as patriotic as the next guy, but he had a lot of business dealings in England that he couldn't afford to lose. It would be another few years before he was forced to choose sides. Meanwhile, an hour south from Wedgeville lived a man named Francis Marion. Like Wragg, he was a plantation owner, a businessman, and a local political figure. But unlike Wragg, he had no question where his allegiance lay. He was an American patriot, by God. Marion was commissioned as a captain in the 2nd South Carolina Regiment and fought under Colonel William Moultrie at the Battle of Sullivan's Island, where just 400 South Carolinians successfully defended Charleston Harbor from the Royal Navy. He drew the attention of the rebel leadership and quickly rose to the ranks. Marion distinguished himself in several small skirmishes and led the recapture of Fort Johnson from the British. In 1780, anticipating a British attack on Charleston, Marion was sent to assist General Benjamin Lincoln in the city's defense. However, before setting out, Marion was invited to a dinner party which turned into, quote, distasteful drunkenness, end quote. The host locked the doors and announced that no one could leave until all the wine was gone. Marion quickly grew bored with the foolishness and decided that he was leaving by jumping from a second-story window, breaking his ankle in the process. This actually turned out in his favor for the patriotic cause. General Lincoln was utterly incompetent in his defenses. The city fell to the British along with several other coastal towns, including Georgetown, home of Wedgeville. Lincoln and all his troops were captured. If Marion had been there, he would have been captured as well. Back at Wedgeville, the British occupation of Georgetown forced Samuel Wragg to make a decision. He declared himself a Tory, sympathetic to the British forces. He opened Wedgeville to help their cause in any way he could. And he wasn't alone. Several other local businesses and plantations decided to become Tories also. As I've said, Mansfield Plantation was used as a command center and Wedgeville as a hospital and a prison for high-profile prisoners. Lincoln's capture and Marion's broken ankle left him America's strongest leader in the South. Marion was promoted to general and fine-tuned his guerrilla, hit-and-run, Fabian strategy of fighting. Marion and his troops knew the low country swamps far better than their opponent. Marion understood how to maximize their numbers and, when they did attack, they hit hard and fast and efficiently. And if they got into trouble, they would retreat back into the South Carolina swamps where the British wouldn't follow. Marion struck first at the enemy's communications and their supply line, disrupting the Brits' movements through the area. He kept the British forces so busy in South Carolina that they were unable to carry out their plan of pushing through North Carolina and into Virginia. Frustrated, the British sent their most ruthless and bloodthirsty commander to hunt down and eliminate Francis Marion. Colonel Benjamin Tarleton earned the nickname Bloody Ben due to his penchant for torturing and killing prisoners and civilians to get the information he wanted. But Marion proved too elusive. Colonel Tarleton sent a telegraph back to his commander saying that, quote,
As for this old fox, the devil himself could not catch him.
From that point on, General Francis Marion was known as the
Swamp Fox.
In In January 1781, Marion was ordered to take Georgetown back from the British. After all, he had liberated Fort Watson and Fort Mott and assisted in the American victory at the Battle of Cowpens. The attack failed. Georgetown remained in the hands of the British. Patriot casualties were low, but 3 soldiers had been taken prisoner, and one of them had been in the room when General Marion was discussing his future plans and strategies. He needed to get the man back before he was interrogated. He reached out to his network of spies and, as it turns out, he had one very close to the source. For every citizen of Georgetown that declared themselves a Tory, there would be just as many neighbors or family members that remained loyal to the colonies. However, with 250 British soldiers occupying Georgetown, they had to keep that fact to themselves. A few of them even turned spy for the American cause. One of these people was Samuel Ragg's daughter. She sent word to Marion that she had information. That night, Francis Marion rode alone to the back of the Episcopal Church. It was dangerous for him to be this deep in enemy territory, and he kept a constant watch for traps or ambush. But it was imperative that he come himself. This was a delicate mission, and he was also determined to protect his spies and refused to allow his closest aides to know their identities. Confident that the coast was clear, he dismounted and crept into the church cemetery until he found the gravestone of a young girl named Lydia. Feeling around the backside of the gravestone, he found a loose piece of brick. Concealed behind that brick was a handwritten note from Ragg's daughter. Marion quickly slipped it into his boot and made his way back to his own camp. Only then, upon his return, did he risk reading it.
My dear patriot, I trust you received my last communication in due time, and that you desire to rescue the prisoner held in our home. In good truth, I perceive that no more appropriate time will present itself for you to free the prisoner than on Thursday next. We will attend a reception at Mansfield Plantation in the evening. I must warn you that my father, whom I love, although his loyalties remain with England, will leave a sentry on the veranda. From your reputation as a leader of your company of men, I rather expect the sentry will cause but little opposition for you. It is not worth my while to try to describe your means of retrieving this man who is being held, for I have not the language to do justice, and preparations occupy me so entirely. And I am very much hurried now, as I expect to send my letter by Mr. de la Villette, who is waiting for me to write. Adieu, your friend, in the name of Success d'Estime, in the dispute between Great Britain and her colonies.
And so, on the following Thursday, Wedgfield was left to the care of one unfortunate soldier, while everyone else prepared to go to a dinner party at Mansfield Mansion. As Samuel Ragg and his daughter stepped outside and into the horse-drawn carriage, the girl hesitated. She looked back at the sentry, who gave her a confident nod, as if to reassure her that her home would be safe in his hands. She fought with feelings of regret, loss, and guilt. The British were the enemy, but they had treated her and her family kind enough. In the end, this was the sacrifice she was willing to make for her country. Without a word, she climbed into the carriage. The man would be buried on the grounds of the Wedgfield plantation. A short time later, the ghost of the Headless Sentry was seen staggering around the garden. The apparition wore a British uniform. Blood ran from its severed neck, pistol in hand. Quite often the apparition is preceded by strange noises. It may sound like a distant roar, or like chains being dragged across the porch of the mansion. Or the sound of disembodied horse hooves. Over the years, many sightings of the Headless Sentry have been reported. Sometimes, it's seen on horseback. just like the legend of Sleepy Hollow. Sometimes it patrols the grounds, fulfilling its duties, and sometimes it wanders aimlessly, searching for its lost head. To learn more about these stories, check out Legends and Lore of South Carolina by Sherman Carmichael. There's Best Ghost Tales of South Carolina by Terrence Epke. There's also SouthCarolinaPlantations.com, NPS.gov, OnlyInYourState.com, and ChapelOfHopeStories.com. This episode was researched and written by Jeffrey Cochran. It was produced and hosted by me, Dan Sellers. You can find everything Jeff's up to at adarkerworld.com. You can find everything that we're up to at wreakhavocproductions.com. Special thanks to the brilliant vocal actor Ian Russell for his talents in this episode. Be sure to like the official Facebook page at facebook.com/Carolina Haynes. We're on Instagram at Wreak Havoc Productions, and I'm on Twitter at Hank vs. the Undead. You can find the Carolina Haynes podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and YouTube. Or you can stream directly from our feed at carolinahaynes.libsyn.com. As always, you can find everything about Carolina Haynes, including the Carolina Haynes book, at our website, carolinahaynes.com. Do me a favor. Let's keep this show's listenership growing. Share this show with a friend. Share it on social media. And be sure to leave a review. Everything helps and is definitely appreciated. You can email me any thoughts and concerns at carolinahaynes@gmail.com. We'll be back in 2 weeks with a new episode. Tune in then to hear more about those things that go bump in the night.